I did not visit my home country ever since I moved to California. I left Mexico to finish my studies abroad, and then I eventually settled in Los Angeles for my job. I was too caught up with my work and my new life that I didn't have the time nor the urge to go back home and visit my relatives, but that was until the two of my coworkers wished to witness the popular festivities of my country. Since I thought this would be a good opportunity to see my family again, I decided to make the arrangements and fly back home for the first time in a very long time. We went to Mexico a day before Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead. As one of the most popular holidays, it was a perfect occasion for us to experience the Mexicans' festive culture. People would walk around the streets in flamboyant costumes while a band of musicians escorted them. It was a form of a rather loud and frenzied parade where noise was in a guise of overlapping songs. We were picked up at the airport by my cousin Diego. My friends Gary and Jake were excited to walk around as we passed along the colorful decorations, but I warned them not to wander off on their own. They are a couple of free-spirited blokes who had the tendency of behaving inappropriately when they get too excited, and I didn't want them to cause any trouble this time around. After seeing my relatives and having a meal with them, my cousin invited us to come with him in Barrio in Tepito to buy some stuff in preparation for the celebration. I strongly refused the invitation since I was well aware how Tepito could be dangerous, especially for foreigners like my friends Gary and Jake. However, they were both too hyped to walk outside and see the local market, and I couldn't stop them from going. Across the way, we passed by the rows of stunning flower arrangements in front of the houses and establishments. The striking golden hue of the marigolds along with the deep shades of chrysanthemum flowers were such a delight to see. The kids running on the streets with their huge headdresses made of aggressively painted paper mache brought back the memories of my childhood days. Even though I was strongly against it, I enjoyed the ride nonetheless. The grandiosity of the festival, accompanied by the locals' enthusiasm for the occasion, was simply on a different scale. An event like this was not something that we would see in the city, and it was one of the things that I missed the most. Among the explosion of colors all over the area, the thing that caught our attention the most was the long line of people carrying unconventional offerings. Some were on their knees, and some were lighting long rolls of weed like an incense. They were lighting up tobaccos and offering liquor shots in front of an image of a saint with a skull for a head and a golden garb. Gary and Jake were deeply intrigued by this practice, and it was no other than the devotees of Santa Muerte, or the folk saint of death. Despite of her image, Santa Muerte was a symbol of hope for a lot of people. It became a patron saint for those who were ousted by the Catholic Church because of their dark past, illegal deeds, and unaccepted identities. Believers claim that their patron saint accepted their faith despite of their flaws. Because of what they saw in the offerings from the Saint of Death's followers, Jake and Gary wondered if they could smoke some weed while we were there. I told them not to even consider it. While I was persistently discouraging my friends and telling them how they might get tangled up with bad people, Diego interjected and said that he knew someone in Tepito that would sell us the stuff they wanted. He enthusiastically said that there wouldn't be any problem at all, but I assumed that he was simply taken by the reckless attitude coming from the two. I intensely rejected the idea, but it was 3 of them against me, and I couldn't win the argument. When we arrived at the market, I went ahead and grabbed some stuff to cook for the upcoming celebration while my friends tagged along with Diego to meet up with this guy. Diego advised them to keep some distance since the guys would surely bump up the price if he knew he was transacting with foreign visitors. They initially took his advice and stood from afar, but the illegal transaction was taking longer than we expected. Jake grew impatient and decided to confront the guy on his own, and that was the biggest mistake he had made. Diego was shoved out of the picture when the seller realized that foreigners were involved. He called the main dealer on his phone, and he asked Jake and Gary to come with them on their own. At that point, my cousin Diego already had a bad feeling about it. He wanted to cancel the transaction. I also tried to step forward and say that it was a bad idea all along, but Jake just laughed it off and said that everything will be fine. Gary and Jake followed the guy. We tried to tell them, but we eventually got lost in the busy crowd at the market. An hour had passed. I tried to call their phones, but they were shut off. Diego and I patiently waited for my friends to get back, but they never showed up again. Few moments later, a random guy approached us and whispered a warning. He told us to leave while we can, or we might end up missing as well. All frantic and concerned, I decided to call the local authorities and told them the situation. But just like what I expected, they were unwilling to confront the thugs in Tepito in order to avoid an unwanted commotion, especially when a popular celebration was about to take place. The local market and other establishments nearby were generating money from the huge number of tourists coming to take part in the festivities, and they did not want to lose this opportunity. They just advised us to wait for a while longer, but I'd never heard from Jake and Gary again. The Day of the Dead finally came, but I was in no position to celebrate. Accompanied by my uncle and my cousin, we went out to search for my missing friends. The authorities couldn't be counted on, and we had to look for them ourselves. Unfortunately, most of the areas were already blocked for the occasion, and the streets were filled with numerous parades. The situation made it harder to roam around. We searched on foot while the stereos and instruments were blaring as loud as they could from every side. Diego tried to contact the guy that they met in the market to ask for my friends, but instead of helping, he warned him not to get involved. I already had an idea of what might have happened to Gary and Jake, but I did not want to accept it. I was separated from my cousin and uncle since I was already panicking. Unfortunately, my suspicion was confirmed when I passed along an electronic shop with their television sets on the window. What I feared might happen to my friends just happened. There was news about 2 dead bodies found in a dumpster in an alley. They were stabbed numerous times and shot in the head. Even though their identities were yet to be officially verified since all their possessions were stolen, I knew right there and then that they were my missing friends based on their clothes filled with blood. I walked away from the shop while holding my tears as a loud parade passed by behind me. It was the Day of the Dead, but I didn't imagine that I would mourn for mine. On my way back to meet my cousin and uncle, I came across the portrait Santa Muerte once again. I haven't smoked a single cigarette for a while, but I felt like smoking after what happened. I was never really the kind of guy who believed in patron saints. Perhaps it was out of misery, hopelessness, and spite, which drove me to ask the saint for help. With all my heart, I begged justice for the death of my friends as tears flowed across my face. I offered my half-lit cigar, and I moved along. As I was already with Uncle and Diego, we were already walking on our way back home when our path was blocked by one of the parades. Coincidentally, they were the patrons of Santa Muerte, which I prayed to a while ago. The air was enveloped in smoke from the fireworks all around us, and everything became hazy. I was probably just seeing things because of my mental state at the time. The patrons were parading a human-sized image of the folk saint of the dead, and it was wearing a golden veil. However, I could almost swear that the image slightly turned her head at me, and her veil suddenly turned black for a very brief moment. The banners with the name of Santa Muerte that they carried alongside them had a skull candy at the tip. When the smoke covered the air and everything was a blur, I saw the ornate fake skulls turning into actual human heads on the spikes. One of them was of the guy who led my friends to their deaths. I did not mention it to anyone since nobody would have believed me anyway. On the following day, there was another tragic highlight on the news. 2 dead bodies were found after the parade, and they were missing their heads. Diego soon confirmed that one of them was the guy that he knew from the market, and the other guy was a drug dealer. Perhaps it was by chance or a granted wish. Maybe it was not the right justice that they legally deserved, but it was the kind of justice that I wanted for my friends.